Welcome to the second week of class. I'm just going to make a little bit of adjustment here for the lighting. Sorry about this. That's better. Okay, so yeah, we're on week 2 here. I hope everyone enjoyed week 1. And we're going to be diving into more about soil health this week. I also have some cool demos for you. But before we actually get to that, we are going to just do a little bit more of an expansion, I guess, on some of the ideas that we talked about last week. And before we even get to that, we're going to do a breakout session so that, we're going to do a little bit of, we'll have Q&A right now, and then we're going to do a breakout session just so you guys can meet more of each other. Okay, so just to open it up right now for Q&A. So who has any questions from last week or anything you want clarified, or even just any comments on the homework if you did the homework or read any of the links I suggested, or the videos, watch any of the videos. Just go ahead and feel free to unmute yourself.
I started reading Braiding Sweetgrass.
How'd you like it?
It was amazing. Yeah, I only got the first few chapters, but just kind of, started to think a little bit more about what you were talking about, which is a different way of thinking with regards our impact on the land, and how that we can be a force for good. And that's just a shift from a culture that we're familiar with and have been imbued into something a little bit different, which steps back towards the Native American type thought process and relationship with the land. So that was really cool. Good.
I'm glad you enjoyed it. I really like that book because it kind of gives you both perspectives. She approaches the earth and ecology from this scientific perspective and the scientific background that she has, and also from the cultural background that she has. And I love how she's trying to bridge the two, or not trying to bridge the two, but seeing that they're not, again, like a lot of what we'll talk about in this class, that they're not separate. So,
yeah, cool.
Yeah. How about Jacqueline? I see you raising your hand. Yeah.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I feel like that ad. In reading her, I was struck by not only all of the information and, like you said, both sides of something, but the fact that her writing is like poetic. It's just beautiful. So for anyone who hasn't read it, it's worth it just to read it from that perspective. It's beautiful.
Absolutely, yeah. Again, I would just there's, I guess one of the things I find is, in terms of like scientists and climate change and convincing people to make a difference or to make changes in their lives, like a lot of the way that we're, I guess, conditioned to interact with people is to kind of just vomit a bunch of facts at them, like, oh, like the soil carbon and the carbon from the air and so many carbon, tons of this, and people change when they feel, just when they feel that they need to change, they'll change, and it's not just through facts, like facts and information, I find, don't actually get people to change very often, especially like at a deep level. So Thank you for sharing, Jacqueline. And I think I saw one more hand. You can. Oh, okay. And also using the chat thing about Ashley Summer.
I started reading Braiding Sweetgrass as well, and I went straight to the chapter, The Language of Animacy, I think it's called, because I'd listened to an interview with her of the same name, and it really resonated. And one thing that I just thought I'd mention is the use of the word indigenous, because when you were using that word last week, Farmer Rishi, it was feeling sort of othering to me, or like something that I couldn't achieve. And she talks about it as, like, she describes learning the language of her home, like that you can learn the language of the land, and that's what it means to be indigenous, which I guess made me feel hopeful, like that I can achieve that. It's not like because I was not born here, I cannot be of the place where I am. So that was just a helpful reframe for me that I thought I would share.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think this idea of indigeneity being more about being in relationship rather than where you were born or what your skin looks like, I guess. So thank you. And if you want to share that the interview that you saw, leave it on the Teachable for this week as a comment. Okay, cool. So we're gonna go out into a breakout discussion. So I'm gonna put you all into groups of 4, and we're just gonna spend about 4 or 5 minutes. And I just want you to discuss any of the ideas that stood out for you from last week. Maybe anything that's been circling in your mind. If you had something about the homework that impacted you. I saw, I was trying to make it, you guys are actually doing an excellent job at, or you did an excellent job this last week at doing the homework. I was trying to make it through all of the responses. There were just so many. So yeah, let's go into the breakout and feel free and share with whoever's in your group about your whatever impacted you from last week. Okay, so just some additional kind of reframing. This is kind of building off of the visualization that we did last week. We're going to do another visualization today as well. But what I try to do myself in thinking about any garden that I tend or care for is again trying to shift away from that perspective of ownership and control and shifting more into the perspective of community and relationship. So this is just some kind of a practice I have for myself, and a practice that I might encourage you to take up as well. But the phrase "your garden" or "my garden," right? We all, in my garden, and we're using this term in this kind of ownership sense. So I try to change that in my mind and just say, I still say my garden, your garden, but what I'm visualizing instead is going back to the kind of the analogy of the body, or not analogy, but maybe the reality of the body. But your garden, like my garden, like if I'm at a university, I would say my university. So it's this larger being that I am part of and still have some claim to. So my garden, your garden, this is a larger being that you're a part of. And again, some additional reframing. We have this kind of strange thing in English where we say, like I grew this tomato plant, or I grew this cucumber tree. And would it sound right, if I had a kid and I say, oh, hey, this is my kid, I grew him. right? Are you in any way physically involved in the growth of your child, right? Are you somehow causing your child to grow? It's a little bit, it's kind of a weird idea, but what I like to think is that as a gardener, just like with people, like I'm not causing the plant to grow. I'm not causing a person to grow. What I am trying to do is create the conditions for the plant to be healthy, right? I'm trying to create the conditions for the life forms in my garden to be healthy. And so this actually helps, I think, a lot when you're starting a garden, because a lot of people they'll come to me, come to one of these classes, and they say, or they don't come to a class actually, and they say, oh, I can't be a gardener. I have a brown thumb. I kill everything. Everything I touch dies. And this is again like back to that idea of ownership, right? Like, oh, if the plant dies, then it's my fault. I did that. And I'm completely at fault, and I'm a terrible person, and plants die because of me. And instead, if we say, okay, I'm not the cause, like the sole cause of the plant's death, but my goal is actually to create the conditions for this plant to be healthy. Then I'm in the right mindset to think, okay, what are the conditions that this plant needs that maybe I'm not providing right now? And so usually those conditions are, healthy soil, adequate water, right amount of sunlight, companion plants, animals, insects. That's what we're actually trying to do as gardeners. We're trying to create these conditions for the life around us to thrive. Okay, is that helpful? Okay, I'm seeing some thumbs up. Wonderful. And building off of that, what are some of the intentions that we have in a regenerative garden? And this is kind of my personal list. And you can definitely have your own. That's why I'm not trying to be, give you any rules. I'm just kind of provide some guidance here. So for me, when I'm talking about, creating a regenerative garden, what am I talking about creating? For me, beauty is kind of paramount. The garden should be beautiful. It should be, just and beautiful not just in a visual sense, but visual beauty. I want fragrances. I want textures. I want kind of that sense of wonder and meandering and being lost and all of that, right? All of that contributes to the sense of beauty of a garden. And I also want this. I try to think about in the terms of a garden, like what will really stop someone? What will really, and including myself, what will stop me in this garden that will make me just completely forget, whatever it is that I'm worrying about, whatever it is that, I'm all the thoughts that are circling in my head. What is it in this? What can I include in this garden that will just kind of shock me out of that anxiety, right? And bring me into the present moment. And again, this usually comes back to beauty. And so it's, what are those beautiful things? What are those beautiful flowers, those beautiful smells, the softness under your feet, the songs of the birds? What are those things of beauty that we can enliven our garden with, and invite people, not just people, but any life form that enters our garden to enter into slowness and enter into presence. Of course, we're in regenerative gardening. We're working towards enriching soil and water cycles. We are also, the next item, slowing and densifying energy cycles, is something we're going to go into a little bit more next. And then finally, growing homes. And I just like this idea because it's not like it's not a house. It's not a habitat, right? A lot of times we talk about in ecological circles or environmental circles, we talk about habitat creation. And I kind of don't like that word because a habitat is just a place where, you know, it just seems very mechanical to me. And I like the idea of creating a home. So I'm creating a home for birds, I'm creating a home for lizards, I'm creating a home for fungi. And we have this sense of family together in this home. So that's for me what regenerative gardening is about. And I really want you to consider when you're creating a garden or when you're working in a garden, who and what is your garden for? This is a very important question to ask yourself in the very beginning. We're gonna talk about this idea further in the class that we have on garden design, but I just want to introduce it so that you can start thinking about it for yourself. And for most, I would say most people that are coming into this class, or not most, but a lot of people that would be coming into this class, I find that, I ask them, what is it that you want to garden for? And for a lot of people, the immediate answer is to grow food for myself, right? And I did a kind of a poll on Facebook, because I have a lot of gardening friends on Facebook, people who have made gardening or farming their profession, and I just wrote a question: why do you garden? And I think I got 75 responses back from that, and there was probably 5 that mentioned food, and about the remainder of them were things like, I garden because it calms me down. I garden because I feel connected when I garden. I garden because it helps with my anxiety. I garden because it's a place where I can connect with my family and my kids. I garden to be outdoors, to get sunlight, to use my body. So what I'm trying to say is basically that when we're gardening, I feel like the food is kind of a of course thing. There will be some food product in most gardens. And what I really want you to think about is, why is it that you're looking to garden? Like, what is it that you're looking for yourself? What healing are you looking for? And if the garden is not just for you, what is it that the other beings that are entering in this garden, what are they looking for? What do they need? And create the garden for that. And that will, I guarantee you, you'll have a much richer garden if you start with those questions and those ideas. All right. So before we get into the next section on energy flow, I'll stop and just ask for any questions or comments. Anyone? Okay, so we'll keep going. Okay, so energy flow, this is a kind of an important topic for the class. Again, something that I'll be coming back to throughout the class almost every week. So it's something that I hope that the idea really sinks in and you can use this as a guide for yourself in your life and in your garden and in your relationships. So, well, I'm going to actually go back here. So we're going to do this visualization. And what I'd like you to do, again, is to close your eyes. And we're going to take it's going to take a few minutes here. Okay, so keeping your eyes closed here. I want you to imagine your garden, visualize your garden as it is right now. And again, if you don't have a garden, I want you to visualize let's say just like a bare piece of land. Okay, so a garden that hasn't been started yet and is in need of a lot of care and love. Okay, so find yourself in this garden. And I just want you to see the life that is passing through this garden right now. Okay, so see the bird that's flying overhead. See the squirrel that's running around, maybe looking for a snack. See the butterfly kind of flapping through. See a car driving by, and in that car, there's the owner of a local coffee shop. There's maybe the owner of a local juice shop. See your neighbor walking by this garden. Visualize the rain. Okay, the rain is falling on this garden. All these forms of energy kind of passing through or passing over or passing by. And what happens to this energy? Like, is there a relationship with that energy and the garden that you're in? Okay, so does the bird, what does the bird see looking down as she flies over? And what does the butterfly see as she's flying over? And how does the water act as it rains down and lands on the soil? How does the water act? How does the sunlight coming down on the garden, what does that do to the garden? Okay, keep with the visualization here. There's a second step, and now what I want you to do is imagine this garden just develop in a rich and abundant way. So now imagine, seeds sprouting on the ground, trees growing up, getting tall. Imagine the soil getting deep and rich. Imagine the flowers growing and blooming. Imagine the manures of the animals that are dropping over the years. The fungi running underground, connecting all the plants together, the plants and the trees. And now let's play the bird flying over again. And now what does the bird see as it passes over this garden? And maybe what does the bird do as it passes over this garden? And what does the butterfly see? And what does the butterfly do? And how does the sun act on this rich garden? And how does the neighbor act as she walks by? How has that relationship changed? Okay, and now you can come back over here. Okay, and again, I'm just going to ask for some responses or some reactions. What did you see? Anyone want to share? No? Okay, I'm going to call on someone then.
I think
Oh,
in the first instance, the squirrel and the bird and the person passing by had no connection with the garden because it's very there's not much life in it.
Right. They just kind of. How quickly did they move through the garden when in the first situation?
Very quickly, not stopping, and not necessarily even glancing down or across.
Right. Nothing of interest. Right. Just kind of passed through.
Yeah.
And then as you moved into the richer garden.
Yeah, all manner of attractions for birds, insects, people driving by, sort of giving the garden a second glance because it's full of color and life and attractive, beautiful.
Did anyone see, like for me, if the car is driving by and it's going whatever the speed limit is, and then the car just immediately like slows down and it's like, whoa, what is that? And the bird kind of stops and lands on a branch and is like looking around for worms, and looking for caterpillars. And so we have this energy that was just flying through, right? Not paying attention, doesn't matter what's there, why bother? And now you have that energy just kind of slows down, right? And slows down, and maybe slows down like very significantly. And this I saw this so clearly. Or I guess it's last year now. Last year here in Southern California, we had this migration of butterflies called the painted ladies that was passing through a large portion of LA, and I think San Diego as well. And I saw them on a couple different occasions over the course of about a week. And first I saw them at I was just driving, so I stopped on the side of the road and I watched them. And again, they're just like hurtling past. They're just hurtling past. They went through over the road. They went through a park, and just thousands and thousands of them just flying by, and it was beautiful. And then later that week, I found myself in one of my gardens, one of the ones that we'll be going to this Saturday. And for those of you who will be taking it online, you'll see the recording of that class. So I was there in that garden on a day that the painted ladies were flying through, and most of them flew right by, but actually that was the only place I saw where the butterflies stopped, and they landed on the native plants that we had planted, and they were taking a rest, and I think they were eating some, and I was amazed to see that this little strip of it's like a 7,000 square foot garden along a parking lot and next to a road, and here the butterflies have stopped. And this is exactly what I'm trying to help, or I hope you understand from this visualization. So the idea being that we're trying to build up the energy in our garden by slowing down the energy that is currently passing through our garden, right? Like everything is energy, right? Like water is energy, sunlight is energy, birds are carrying manure that is energy, butterflies are also carrying manure that is energy. Animals are coming through, and it's not just manure too, right? Like the birds and the insects and the animals, they have an energy of care that they can offer. So we're trying to create that slowness, and again invite the presence for every being that's coming through the garden. We're trying to create that space for what is it that the butterflies need and want to rest and eat in this garden? And what do the birds want? And what do the people want? So we're really trying to create a garden that is taking all this energy that's moving very fast through and really slowing it down. And then as it's slowed, we're now building that energy up in the garden. It's as it's slowed down, and as multiple energies are slowed down, then that creates a store of energy for our garden to kind of draw from. And that's what we're trying to do. Is that making sense? Okay. Oh, okay. Farmer Jeef, I see you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I witnessed the densification of energy in the second half of the visualization and reproduction of the birds and other animals and inhabitants that were, at first just passing by, but now they were finding a home and that was densifying the energy, and then they were densifying it again themselves.
Exactly. Yeah. That's the principle that we need to understand here, that we're trying to, which is really difficult, I feel like, in our society, because we're always trying to speed things up, and here our goal is to slow everyone down.
Yeah.
Okay, Nicole Goodfriend. What a nice last name.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So when I think of what's going to slow something down as it passes through my garden, I think what will slow them down is food, something to eat. And so in the first part of the imagery exercise, I had earlier in my years of gardening, and that was where I was growing my food, and I had that sense of possession that you've referred to. This is my garden, this is my food. I don't want these pests on my food, and I did it all organically, which was a whole lot of work keeping those pests off. But what I didn't understand then, and I do understand now, and it's part of why I'm taking this class to get even better at it, is I was ignoring the fact that creating an environment around the kitchen garden that allowed for predatory insects and birds and more lizards, they all needed a home. And they weren't going to stop if they didn't have food. They weren't going to slow down and be present in my garden unless there was sustenance and safety. So I'm slowly creating homes for all of them too. And that was what the second part of the exercise did for me. It gave me permission to dream about what that final product might look like, which even then it's always going to continue to change. But it invited all creatures in so that we could all synergistically work together.
Beautiful. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. Yeah, it is funny, right? Like we had this concept of organic gardening, and organic gardening has up until now basically meant not using petroleum products.
Right.
And maybe the mentality was very similar to industrial agriculture, which is protect everything that's mine and try to kill everything else.
Right, planting things in rows, not using companion planting, not rotating properly. I mean, it's definitely a shift in mentality and approach to more of a permanent, more, I don't know, just a solution that works by itself because you've invited more life rather than less life.
Right. Exactly. Thank you for sharing. Okay, so now we're actually going to get into the some of the meat here. We're going to be talking more about specific practices next week. Today is more just about understanding soil and what we're trying to do with soil. So right now, for most of us right now, our soil is very lacking in energy, right? It has we'll talk about what it's lacking, but it's not a fertile place right now, right? And fundamentally, what we're trying to do with soil is take that energy from the sun, right, which is coming down day after day, hour after hour. And right now, and I'm not saying this is your garden, but maybe in our gardens right now, we have the sun that comes down, and then it's just immediately, like we just discussed, reflected off, right? We have no capacity to slow the sunlight down. We have no capacity to harvest the sunlight. So in a garden, really what we're trying to do is slow that energy, that main energy of the sun that's coming in. We're trying to slow that energy down. And so for this, we need to understand the movement of the sun through our garden. This is a very important skill to have. So I'm going to try to impart this on you today, and we'll do some practice next week as well. What I'm going to ask you to do right now is, if you're in the northern hemisphere, I'm going to ask you to stand up and face your southern direction. So face south if you're in the northern hemisphere. Stand up and face south. If you're in the southern hemisphere, so if you're in Australia or New Zealand or South America, I'm going to ask you to stand up and face north. Okay? And maybe someone can answer for me why I'm asking you to face south in the northern hemisphere and north in the southern hemisphere. Where are we facing?
Best exposure.
The sun, right?
Yes.
The sun exposure. Thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to face you so that you can see what I'm doing. For me, south is like this way. I'm going to face you. Okay, so I want you to be able to understand and be able to tell when you enter a garden or you enter a piece of land. As long as you know where south is, you should be able to kind of determine where shadows and sunlight will fall around any time of year and any time of day. Okay, so this is the skill, right? The skill is I walk onto a piece of land, I determine which way is south, and then I'm able to say, okay, that tree is going to cast a shadow like this at 3 p.m. in June. Okay, and that building over there is going to cast a shadow, about this long at 8 a.m. in December. Okay, that's the skill that we're trying to build. I want you to be able to stand in a place and see how the sun is going to move, no matter what time of year it is. Okay, so you're facing your solar exposure, and let's start with the summer. Let's start summer solstice, when the sun is highest in the sky, or usually around like June, July. Okay, I want you to put your left arm back, facing. Is that right? Facing. Yeah. Okay, so I'm facing. You're going to put your left arm back, so you're facing south, and now your left arm is facing northeast. Okay, this is where the sun will rise in the summer at summer solstice, northeast. As the day progresses, the sun is going to come up. It is going to come kind of close to overhead, and it's going to end up in the south, but just slightly in front of you. Okay? And now at now it turns into the afternoon, so that southern sun, high southern sun in the evening is going to set into the northwest. Okay? So this is the movement of the sun at its peak. It's going to rise in the northeast, come up just barely to the south, and then set in the northwest. You guys got that? Okay? That's the path. Now we're going to go to winter solstice, which would be the darkest day or the least number of sunlight hours of the year. And again, I'm saying all these things, and you'd have to reverse the north and south if you're in the southern hemisphere. Okay, so now we're going to go to winter solstice, which is around Christmas time. That's actually where that date came from, most likely. So winter solstice, where does the sun rise? The sun rises in the southeast, so a little bit in front of me. And now it's going to come up. It's going to come up, but it's not going to get so high. It's going to come up a little bit more in front of me. Okay? And then it's going to set again in the southwest. Okay? And between those two dates, between the winter solstice and the summer solstice, that arc is going to change, right? Gradually. So from winter, in winter, I'm going like this. And then as we get closer to summer, I'm going like this. And then once I hit peak summer, I'm starting in the north. I'm coming forward to the south and then back in the north. Okay? So this is a very important thing to know. You can practice this, and you can also get more accurate depending on where you are, where your latitude is. The higher the closer you are to a pole, the lower and the higher the sun will be at the solstices. That's why, like in Alaska, you have days of complete darkness in the winter and days of complete sun in the summer. Yeah, so you can get, if you know your latitude, or if you just observe. So right now we're in end of January. So we're very close. We're just like a month away from winter solstice. So the sun will just drop a little bit lower. Where you see the sun right now, the sun will drop a little bit lower than that around winter solstice for you. Okay. Anyone have any questions on that? Okay, we're gonna do that again as like a quiz next week. So
how many do we have folks in the southern hemisphere on here? I couldn't tell from the way I saw people positioned, because who knows how you're sitting in your house. But anybody in the southern hemisphere on here? Just wondering. I didn't see anybody. I couldn't.
I think there are some people, but maybe they're not here with us.
Yeah.
I think we had some South American and some Australia.
Yeah, I thought I saw that on the original list, but I was just wondering here today if any of those folks might have a comment.
No, it's a little bit.
I suppose it's all the same, just in reverse. I've just never lived in Australia or South America or South Africa. That's all.
Right,
Thanks.
right. Yeah, thanks, Dan. Okay, so this is, why do we need to know the movement of the sun? Because we're trying to harvest that sun energy all the time. And so we want to know, where is the sun going to be so we can harvest its energy. And we're going to harvest that into the garden, right? And the gardening is building energy by slowing sunlight into soil, plants, animals, and people. That's another way of looking at gardening. Trying to gather this sun energy and move it slowly through people. Or not just people, through life forms. Okay. all right, I think I might have said this last time. Well, you know, a lot of the comments that I get, or a lot of the statements that I hear when I'm teaching gardening classes and consulting, you know, we have this kind of view like, oh, my soil sucks, my soil's terrible, my soil's worthless, my soil's dead. I need to, you know, I see this all the time online as well. Like people who have, have ground space, like they have a house that has soil around it, and they're gardening in pots, right? Because, and what's the idea? My soil sucks. You know, it's useless. I can't grow anything in it. I need to get above it. I need to get away from it. It's terrible. So that's one common soil statement. And then along with that, where can I get new, better, good soil, right? So just to be very clear, do not say these things in this class. This is a false assumption that we're operating under, and what we're learning to do is regenerate soil and create soil health. And all soil has the potential for health, and all soil has value. And we're learning, our first step is to see that all soil has value, and then understand how we can allow the soil to express its value and its worth. Okay, so we're going to start out with just some soil science vocab. I will maybe be mentioning these throughout the classes. The first one is the most important. These are also very helpful just if you're reading articles about soil health or gardening or carbon sequestration, regenerative gardening, regenerative agriculture. All right. So the first one, soil organic matter and soil carbon, or soil carbon, those are basically interchangeable. When we say organic in terms of soil organic matter, we mean organic in the sense of the chemical or the chemistry definition of the term organic. So, when you're talking about organic farming, you're talking about farming that doesn't use petrochemicals. When we're talking about organic matter, soil organic matter, we're talking about the chemistry definition of organic, and that definition is a carbon-based form. Okay, so soil organic matter is the amount of carbon in the soil, carbon molecules in the soil. One of the reason that we talk about soil organic matter a lot is because soil organic matter tends to be a really great representation of the soil's health. It's not the only measure that we can use. It's not the only measure that we should use, but it's one that's very common and usually can give you a baseline, indication of the soil's level of health. So just to give you some examples, in an industrial farm, in an American industrial farm, will usually have a soil organic matter percentage, meaning the percent of carbon in that soil, of less than 1%. It'll be between 0.5 and 1% on most industrial farms. On an organic farm, an industrial organic farm, will have a soil organic matter content of maybe 1 to 2%. Okay, so that's a slight increase for most organic farms. The American prairie, before it was turned to agriculture, had a soil organic matter level around 10 to 20%. Okay, so that's all that organic matter, 20% organic matter, all that soil carbon was lost through agriculture. This is what we hear about when we're talking about the Dust Bowl. Okay, during the Dust Bowl, the organic matter in the prairie soils was destroyed through tillage, and then there was nothing holding the soil together anymore, so the soil just blew away as dust. And we're going to do some demos in a second, and that'll really show this to you visually. And also, from an example I can offer is the soil organic matter at my farm in Pomona, California. When we started, less than 1%. I think it was 0.7% when we started, and we tested every year for 3 or 4 years. By the end of the 3rd year, we were back up to 11%. So that just to give you a little bit of hope and indication of how quickly we can change. We can actually, through these regenerative soil practices, increase soil health quickly and very significantly. All right. The next term on here, the rhizosphere. So rhizo means root. So the sphere around the root, and you can think of this basically as the plant's sphere of influence in the soil. Plants' roots go into the soil, and then they have a kind of they basically have this sphere of influence around the root where they are excreting different molecules, sugars, antibacterials, and they're trying to change the soil directly around the roots so that they can take up the nutrition and nourishment that they need, and also keep any pathogens or anything away from them. So this is the rhizosphere, and then the next term goes along with that, plant root exudates. So again, we have plants are doing photosynthesis. The equation for photosynthesis is water plus carbon with sunlight equals sugar and oxygen. Okay, water and carbon dioxide with sunlight equals sugar and oxygen. The plant puts the oxygen out, and then with the sugar, it has a few options. It can either use that sugar to build its body. It can turn it into green foliar growth. It can turn it into wood. The other option is for the plant to take that sugar and excrete it out through its roots, feeding the microbial life around the roots, stimulating the microbial life around the roots. And that is how we are. Sugar is an organic molecule. It's organic matter. So we're excreting that organic sugar into the soil. The microbes are harvesting that sugar, keeping that energy cycling within the soil. And this is how we have carbon sequestration, right? Through the photosynthetic action of plants, carbon in the air is released as plant root exudates into the soil, and then is slowed in the soil and stored in the soil. Any questions? That's just like a basic primer. I asked you to watch the soil story as homework last week, so that will, that kind of explains the same thing. I just want to make sure we're all on the same page.
How can one measure the psalm? I see that written here. I didn't know if you noticed it.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm gonna bring up, I think the next slide might be on soil labs. I'm gonna go into that in a second. Okay, so we're talking since we're not using the word dirt and we're not using the the idea that the soil is dead, what's the conception that we have to start with? And what I'm going to offer you basically is that we have an immature soil and we have a mature soil, right? We're trying to move our soil along in maturity. And the other way to think about it too is in terms of maturity. If this might be a little bit dark, but if a person is abused, right? If a person is abused or oppressed, they will usually kind of regress back into like a childlike state where you're kind of collapsed in and you're hiding and you develop these kind of childlike features. And that's basically how I think of immature soil. This is a soil that has been suppressed, oppressed, and abused, and is not able to express itself anymore. And what we're trying to do is offer care and love and support to the soil, and food and water, and food in form of compost, in the form of plants that are putting out their exudates. We're providing shelter and cover, and in that process, we're creating the conditions for the soil to mature. Right? We're helping the soil along to mature. So these are just the words I'm going to be using. I'm going to be using immature and mature, and that's kind of how that just helps me keep my mind in the right mindset. Okay, so now we're going to move on to our demos here. I'm going to have my wife is here. She's going to help me with this. I'm going to just give me a second. I need to switch over to a different camera, and I'm going to be turning the slides off, and then we will get back to this. Okay, so here we have a whole. This is. Okay. All right. You guys can see me? This is my wife.
Hello.
This is Arti. She's going to help us out today. All right. So let's get this on the table. Make sure you're looking over there. All right. So what I brought for you guys today, we're going to do 2 different demonstrations here. And the first one is called a water infiltration demo. What I have here is 2 soil samples. Both of them are from my farm. This is a soil sample from this is actually from my neighbor. So this is the starting soil that has been continuously abused and oppressed for years. And here, and I think you should be able to see the difference. This is the soil that we have helped to heal over the years through all of our regenerative practices. So immediately what you see is that, this soil, and actually, one of the biggest differences you can feel is if you pick up these 2 soils, the immature soil feels about 3 times heavier than the mature soil. It's just very, very dense. If you look at them visually, what you see is that the immature soil has a kind of a light color, and the mature soil has this dark chocolate, 70% cacao, which is the reference point that we'll use. We're looking for that 70% cacao chocolate color. Okay, so how this demo is going to work and what we're trying to show. What I'm going to do is each of these containers, these top containers, has holes on the bottom. I'm not going to be able to show that to you. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pour a cup of water onto each of these soils. And what we're going to look for down here is how much and how quickly that water is infiltrating down into this lower tray, okay? And what this is showing us is how well is our soil able to accept water, and how much of that water actually ends up in, let's say, the water table, or able to go back down to the aquifer and refilling our water supplies. Right? Everyone following? Okay. All right. So what I'm going to try to do is pour a jar of water. Same jar, right? Same jar of water. No tricks. Okay. And I'm going to try to pour it at about the same speed onto each of these soils. And then we're just going to watch what happens. Okay. So we'll start with, yeah, I think it looks good. All right. So we're going to start with this one here, the immature soil, and let's just see what happens. Also, I've kind of compressed and compacted this soil to imitate what would be happening in real life, which is, you know, maybe cars driving over, or tractors driving over, or people stomping on it. Compaction over the years. Okay, ready? Here we go. Bring the camera up here so you can see from above. Josh, can you move to just the second camera? Okay, so what do we see happening? Yeah, let's show from the side as well.
That water in nature would run off. It wouldn't absorb. It would run off into, you know, wherever the runoff goes, gutters, and, you know, out to sea eventually.
Taking some of the soil with it.
Yeah,
Exactly.
very bad.
Exactly. Okay, so what we can see right here very clearly is that this water is just sitting right at the surface, right? And because it's in a container, it's not going anywhere. But if this was out in the open, all of that water, because all soil or most soil will have some degree of slope to it, that water is just going to run off somewhere else. So just like we talked about energy flow before, this water has nowhere to go, nothing to, you know, no place for it to call home. And so it's going to keep moving on and find another garden where it can be accepted. Right? And we're just going to keep this sitting here. We'll come back to it throughout maybe a couple times in the class and just see if any of that water has infiltrated. But let's go down to the lower container here and how much water has actually come into the ground. 0, right? No groundwater infiltration. Okay, so now let's go to the healthy soil, the mature soil. And again, this is the same location, my same farm. Only difference is we've cared for and loved this soil for a couple of years. Okay, so let's do this.
Nice camera work.
Thanks.
Okay, can you go to the lower container? Go to the lower container. You gonna see that? Okay, now come back to the top here. And then do the side as well. Okay, so what do we see now? Daniel, why don't you go ahead since.
Well, I'm just saying that, you know, you have absorption and it's passing through, like it is on my own elevated beds. I get a lot of water, you know, that passes through into the buckets that I keep under, just like you got there.
Yeah, exactly. So we see that and let's come back to this one actually. Okay, so in the immature soil, we still have our water sitting right on the top, right? Hasn't moved at all. We have, at this point, we have, you know, maybe 1% of this water has actually absorbed into the soil, and 99% of this water is going to run off. The 1% that actually remains in the soil, the next time it heats up, it's gone. right? We're going to lose it to evaporation. Here, in the mature soil, there is no longer any water sitting at the surface. It's all absorbed in. If you look at the side here, the soil has actually become wet all the way down, and we have water dripping through, and we have water getting down into the ground, into our water table. Right? We're actually restoring our water cycle because the soil is able to accept the water.
You know, that's a really important point where you talked about mentioning the water table, and thanks for doing that, for saying that. I'm glad we didn't lose that.
Could I also see the
absolutely.
middle of the soil to see if even the center has soaked the water?
Oh, in the mature soil?
Middle,
Yeah,
yeah.
It's
Through and through.
yeah. And it's it's kind of pooling right now, but as I leave this, it's going to slowly drip down.
Okay.
And in the immature soil, if we go back to the immature soil, we still just have a big puddle on the surface. Okay?
Thank you.
Where did I put my towel? Okay, so, all right, Josh, you can bring us back to the, just me actually. Okay, so what have we learned here? I find it interesting here living in California. We talk a lot about the drought, our drought, and what's causing all these fires, and the solution to the drought is build more water storage, make more dams. Never any mention of soil health. Never any mention of soil health at all. When you can see from this demonstration that soil health makes 100% of the difference in our water cycles and our water system's health, right? Soil health is the key to water cycle health, and we don't really talk about it at all. Even on a residential landscape, we hear about, and I just find it so funny, right? Like, what does the water company provide us rebates for saving water? The water company provides us rebates for buying a new dishwasher, $1,000 dishwasher, buying a new toilet, $200 toilet, buying new sinks, $100 sink faucets, $80 things. This irrigation controllers, sprinklers, they provide rebates for everything and tell you to do everything. And this is from the water company, right? Like, the people that should know about water, they never mention soil health. Like, no one gives you a rebate to go out and buy $1,000 worth of compost, which would do it, like, not even 1,000, just like a few $100s worth of compost would make such an incredible difference in your garden's water holding capacity, the water cycle of your local ecosystem, all of that, right? If we just had the right view, we could actually change things quite rapidly. Okay, so we're gonna do one more demo here. Just give me a second to set up, and in the meantime, you can ponder about what I just showed you. Yeah, maybe Josh, you want to let's go to a breakout. Let's go to a breakout in groups of 4, and then we'll come back and I'll have this set up. And you guys can just discuss what you saw and any questions you have.
I just added into you guys.
We're back. We're back.
Oh, okay, bye.
All right, thank you. Okay, so we're going to move on to this is the next demo here. This is called the slake test. And what this is going to show is how well the soil is formed together. So we talked about, like, plants and how they're excreting sugars into the soil, and how those sugars are feeding microbes. And what's happening with soil in that process of maturation, that process of regeneration and healing, is that the soil is coming into form. Okay, there are structures being created in the soil, structures of openness and porousness, like we saw in the previous demo, where the soil actually has space for water to come in and for air to come in. Soil needs oxygen. So if the soil is very compacted, there's no oxygen. And so the microbes and the roots and all the organisms within the soil, they work to create a structure, and that structure allows in water and air, allows roots to come in, get down deep into the soil. That's what the maturation process of soil looks like. One of the other things that happens in that maturation process is the soil actually becomes glued together. Plants excrete these sugars, and they feed fungi, and then fungi kind of they're the web that kind of hold everything together. Okay, and so what this is going to show is the difference between, again, a immature soil and a fungally glued soil, and how those soils act in response to water. Okay, so if you've heard a lot about soil erosion, you've heard these statistics about how we're losing so many inches of topsoil every year. Every time it rains, we lose soil. If you live in an area where you have mudslides, this is basically what's happening. You have soil that's not well glued together, and it's kind of dissolving under the force of water. So, and same with dust, right? Soil's not being held together, so wind blowing over it can just easily pick it up and blow it away. The way this demo is going to work, I just have 2 containers, water in each one. I got a little kind of a basket I made out of wire mesh here, and that's just sitting in here. And now what we're going to do is we're going to take little globs of soil. Okay, this is soil I got from a construction site, so it's been heavily abused. And I'm just going to drop it in to this container, and we're going to see what happens as soon as I drop it in. Okay, and again, this is very compressed, right? So you would imagine that since it's so compressed together, that it's going to stay together. Okay, let's try it. Okay, let's get down a little bit. Okay, and you see that once that soil comes in contact with water, it just immediately starts to disintegrate. It has no structure. It is just falling apart. And if I give it a little shake, it just falls apart faster and faster. Okay? Which is what would happen in a real rain. You would have some pressure from the rain coming down. Okay, and that soil is just dissolving, right? It's got no form. It's formless. It's not a structure. There's no glues. There's no microbes. Nothing. And now, in comparison, I picked up, soil from my farm that had some plants growing in it, and it also, I picked an area where I could see fungus under grasses. Grasses are really good at feeding soil microbes. So soil under a grass will generally be really well structured. And so now we're going to just break off. Let's try to do this without making a mess in my house. Okay, so I'm going to drop this mass here. And actually, one thing I just noticed is as soon as I did this soil smells like mushrooms. This has a mushroomy smell to it. So that's one indication that the soil has fungi in it. All right, so now let's put this in. Okay, nothing. No loss of soil. Soil remains glued together and actually absorbing the water. If I leave this in here, the water is going to wick up into the soil and actually wet the entire soil. Right? We have roots in here holding the soil together. And this is, this soil is actually loose, right? The soil, the previous soil was hard and compact and dry. You think, okay, I'll put that in water, it should stay together. No, that soil was compact and I put it in water and it fell apart. This soil is loose. It's, if I stick my finger in here, it's soft. Okay? And even though it's soft and loose, it stays together. We have almost no erosion. All of the soil is held together. And this is the action, this is the structure and the form that soil organisms are providing. Go ahead, Nicole.
It has pore space available for the water. The other one was so compact, there was zero, I don't know about zero, but there was so little pore space. And that is really cool to see. Thank you for doing that.
Yeah, these are great demonstrations. If this becomes something that you're talking to people about, or you ever giving presentations to cities, to companies, whoever, these are really great presentations. Very simple to put together. And if you have access to a garden that has healthy soil, you can easily do these. These are just these restaurant, plastic serving containers. You can find these at like a restaurant supply. I think I got them at Smart and Final. They're from Smart and Final.
Can I just ask, in terms of soil?
Yeah. I think you muted yourself again. Could you?
Oh, what about if the soil is like a sandier content in the soil?
Yeah, we're going to talk about that next. Okay. But basically, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what your original soil texture is. Okay, when we talk about sandy, silty clay, which is what we're going to get into next, that is just a texture of the original minerals that make up the soil. That has nothing to do with the soil's ability to form structure. All soil has the ability to form structure. Doesn't matter what the base mineral material is, clay, sand, silt.
It can still be a mature soil, but be a sandy, mature soil.
Yeah. We're gonna get into that just next. Okay.
Wait. With fungi, I mean, is that because I thought you said that at the beginning of the experiment. So it's the presence of fungi that causes the reaction that we saw. In other words, if you had a more loamy or sandy makeup, it would still, as long as it had fungi present, you would have the same kind of reaction. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, it's the presence of the healthy microbial population that provides us with this effect. It has nothing to do with I'm sure there's some influence of the base minerals, but for this, any soil can do this. No matter what you start from, any soil can do this.
The experiment that you just ran, does that have a name? Somebody's asking.
Yeah, this is the SLAKE test, SLAKE, and I'll put it's up on the slides too.
Thank you.
You can also search for both of these on YouTube, I think. There's videos of other people doing them, so it's pretty easy to find. Okay, so we're gonna go.
Can I have a quick question? When you say fungi, is that the same thing as mycelium?
That is the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
Mycelium is technically like the strands of the fungi, but basically the same. Any other questions? Yeah, I think we're done with that. We're going to turn that camera off. Okay, just give me a second. I'll go back to the slides. Okay, great. All right, so that was the infiltration. The first one was the infiltration demo. The second one is the slake test demo. And now let's start talking about, what is soil? What are we talking about here? Okay, so like we just mentioned earlier, soil, when we're talking about immature soil specifically, soil is categorized on the types of minerals and the size of the types of the minerals that make up the soil. So I asked you to bring a jar to class today, and if you didn't, that's okay. You can do this. You can do this another time on your own. What we're gonna do with this jar is try to examine the mineral content, the mineral size of our garden soil. So if you see on what you see on the slide is a kind of a general categorization of the soil mineral sizes. So we have a sandy particle. Sandy soil is a soil where you can see most of the particles with your naked eye. Okay, and it's not only can you see it, but you can feel individual grains of the soil. Silt soil is basically the smallest particle that you can see, but you can't really feel an individual grain. Okay, so and a silt soil is 10 times smaller than a sand soil, and then 10 times smaller than silt, which is invisible to the human eye, is clay. So clay is a very dense soil, and any soil will be a mixture of these three types of particle sizes. Okay, so you'll have some percentage clay, some percentage silt, some percentage sand. How your soil acts when it is, I see your question, Nicole, I'll get to you in a second. How your soil acts when it is unstructured, when it has no form, when it doesn't have microbial life, is going to be strongly affected by the soil type that we're talking about here. All right, so for those of you at home who have a clay soil, a heavy clay soil, what you probably find is that soil is extremely compact. It's hard to dig into. It's hard to get water into. It's hard to get nutrients into. It's hard for roots to get into it, and just nothing seems to be happening. Right? It's just solid. Right? On the other hand, if you have a very sandy soil, what you'll probably find is that the soil is very easy to dig into. Water easily gets into the soil. Nutrients easily get into the soil, but they, as easily as they come in, they also wash out. So a sandy soil it's easy to get water into it, but then the water just drains out of it very quickly. And you put some nutrients on that soil, and those nutrients wash out very quickly. So in the end, the result is basically that you have soil that is getting very little water and very little nutrients. And the only difference would be that clay is initially very difficult to work with in terms of digging and planting. Sand is much easier to work with, and silt is in the middle. This is why silt has traditionally been considered a preferred soil type for farming, because it's right in the middle. It's not too hard. It's not too soft. It's not too porous. It's not unporous. Okay, so what you're going to do with your jar is you got your jar. You see I've filled it half with soil. I filled it up with water, the remainder. And I put a few drops of dishwashing soap in there. Now what I'm going to do is just shake it up. shake it up really nice. Make sure you get everything from the bottom. Okay. And then I actually want to set it down on a table and just leave it overnight, 24 hours. I want to leave this. Now, initially, like right now, just after a minute or two, you'll start to see the soil settling here at the bottom, okay? And the soil that settles at the very bottom, the coarse soil where you can see the individual particles, that is going to be your sandy soil. The next layer that you see, where you can still kind of see the particles, but they're more densely packed together, that is your silty soil. The clay soil I'm not going to be able to see until tomorrow. It takes 24 hours for the clay to settle down. It's so small that it just kind of disperses in the water, and you need to wait 24 hours till you get the clay content. So once you have that the 3 percentages, then you can kind of look on this slide. So if you have a 50% clay and a 40% silt and a 10% sand, then you use this diagram. And I know this triangle is kind of confusing, but once you kind of learn to follow the lines there, you can determine what your soil is categorized as. For me, your soil category is pretty irrelevant. All I want you to, all this will help you understand is whether, if you have a higher clay soil, you're going to have difficulty at first. You're going to have difficulty getting into your soil. You're going to have difficulty digging. You're going to have difficulty planting trees. And what you're trying to do through soil regeneration is open that soil up. In a sandy, or on the other side of the spectrum, on a sandy soil, what you're trying to do is form the sand particles together, glue those particles together. And the result in either case, when you apply these practices, is going to be a healthy soil like we just saw in these demonstrations. A soil that is open, porous, soft, chocolate color, smells nice, easy for the plant's roots to get into, holds together well, glued together well, all of that. That's the end result in either case. So it doesn't matter, or in any case, it doesn't matter where your soil is along these spectrums, the result is going to be just about the same. Let's see if there's some questions here. Okay, all right. So the other thing I would recommend you do, especially if you're in an area, even if you're in a rural area, in fact, you want to test the existing soil that you're starting with, heavy metals. So, for example, if your garden is near a mine, if your garden could possibly have been built on land that had some kind of industrial use before, you want to test for heavy metals. Specifically, lead is the one that we're concerned with in terms of human health. Lead is kind of a neurotoxin. So if we have lead in our soil, we want to be aware of it. And there are some great resources online. If you just type in lead, soil, and mitigation. I'll try to find a link and post it as well. But basically, if you have lead, you don't want to be inhaling it. That's primarily the way that you will get lead into your body, or your kids will get lead into your body. Lead is more of a concern for children than for adults. It affects the development of the mind. Once you're mature, it's less of a concern. Basically, if you have lead in your soil, it's going to be even more important for you to do these soil regeneration practices, because in increasing the organic matter of your soil, you're going to actually trap that lead. The way that we inhale lead is just by dust, kicking up dust and breathing the lead in. That's how we get lead in our bodies primarily. So by forming the soil, we're going to keep the lead trapped in the soil and safe for us to use. Okay. Nicole, you had a question. I forgot.
Actually, you answered it earlier, but I have another one now. Would like a liquid Castile soap be okay for this test? Or does it need to be like a Dawn dish soap?
No, liquid soap is fine. Any soap is really fine.
Okay.
The soap will just break up any bonds. So if I took a mature soil and did this, then I need the soap to actually break apart all the glues that the microbes have created, so I can actually get the mineral content to separate. That's what we're trying to do.
I see. So if you don't mind me asking a follow-up question to lead being in the soil and adding OM, it kind of binds together and it's less likely to fly up and get into our lungs. What if you have like chickens and guineas all around that keep scratching? Will it keep releasing lead particles even if you add OM?
Yeah, so this is kind of going back to the this soil sample here, right? So this soil once you have a really healthy soil like this, there is no possibility for dust, right? Even what the chickens would be kicking up is soil that has been small aggregates of soil. Okay, there's no way. Yeah, every part of the soil is structured in this surface. If I go deeper, if I go below this, then I'll get to that unstructured soil. But in these top, for my farm, like in the top 5-6 inches, the soil is all structured. And so even if the chickens are digging up, the soil is still in its structure.
Thank you.
My wife is upset at me. Okay, let's keep moving. We got 15 minutes left. Okay, all right. So we know that what we're examining in the jar test that we did is we're examining the mineral content of our soils. Okay, what we're trying to get to in maturing the soil is adding organic matter. So that would be like maybe a first step of maturing the soil would be adding a few inches of compost onto the soil just to get that some organic matter available as food for the microbes that are existing in the soil. All soil has microbes. Doesn't matter how oppressed and abused and terrible it looks. There are microbes in the soil. We're going to try to feed those and build them up. So if we take a compost and we add it to the soil, we're feeding those microbes. We're also introducing new microbes. And then we have what I would call an organic soil. Again, carbon matter organic soil, not USDA organic soil. When we build up beyond that, when we get to a healthy soil, okay, we have the minerals that have been formed into structures with organic matter. We have microorganisms. We have living roots. And this is the more of the full structure of a healthy soil, a mature soil. And on top of that, we have a loving gardener. Okay, so these are the things together that make a healthy soil, and this is what we're trying to do. We're trying to start from that base, that base of minerals that we have that we previously called dirt, and we're trying to just build that up. Okay, so, and again, we're talking about harvesting energy. How does the soil harvest energy? What does the soil, what is the energy that the soil harvests? And so I'm gonna ask you here, I'm gonna ask for some feedback. How is this, when we're looking at this picture, how is the soil harvesting energy? You can raise your hand or you can just unmute yourself. What kind of energy harvesting processes are going on? Nicole, go ahead.
Obviously energy from the sun, and then I'm also seeing a lot of animals that poop, and they also die and they decompose. And then you had mentioned earlier that sometimes roots of certain plants don't use their sugars for foliage, but release it into the soil. So there's energy transfer there.
Yes, yes. Okay, you got a bunch of them, right? So we have plants that are harvesting sun energy, exuding that through their roots. We have animals that are pooping on the soil. We have animals that are peeing on the soil. We have animals that are dying, decomposing into soil. And same with the plants, right? We have trees that are dropping their leaves. Those leaves are feeding the soil. We have trees that are creating fruit. That fruit is hits the ground and is feeding the soil. We have plants that are going to dry up, and then animals might smash those dried up plants into the soil. That's going to feed the soil. So we have all these processes going on, right, that are all actively encouraging the soil's health to get better. It's creating that soil health and making the soil stronger, more resilient. So that's what I just, I want you to kind of be able to see what's going on. And so we're going to try to help foster some of these practices in our own garden. I'm going to skip this for now. Okay. And, looking at a residential, a typical residential yard, what are some of the soil regeneration practices that are happening in this yard already? What is happening here that is trying to build up the soil's health? And again, this is a question I'm looking for an answer from you guys.
The trees.
Yeah, okay. So we have trees, and they are, what are the trees doing, Swada?
They're the ones that are capturing the carbon from the atmosphere, and they are releasing it into the soil. And they will also be the host to some birds and other species which could come back to rest on them.
Okay, perfect. Yeah, so we have sugars going out through the roots. We have birds stopping. When the bird stops on the tree, what's it going to do?
It's going to probably find a worm, a bug, something to eat, and then it's going to probably poop right there, and that's going to be energy coming back to the soil.
Perfect. Okay, very good. Thank you. Okay, what else is going on? What else
I can't
what's
see what they're. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say I can't tell what they're trying to grow, but they're trying to grow something, and it looks a little maybe compacted and just not a lot of structure yet. So maybe it's got a slow start. But I also noticed that they, if there is a compaction issue, they have not placed anything on the soil to make it worse. So that's a positive.
Okay. Well, tell me about the plants that are growing there. Like what you mentioned compaction. So what do you think those plants are trying to do as they grow?
Well, roots will help aerate, but they have to have an opportunity to really take off. Yeah, it looks like there's a little bit of work to do there.
Definitely.
And maybe it's I can't tell what's planted because the photo's so small, but if they were to add maybe, I mean, I know it's residential, but if they could add something that's more nitrogen fixing, maybe that could help.
Yeah, definitely that could help. And again, this image is just like a random image from online of, what I see a lot of yards look like. So I'm not just trying to show you specific plants or anything, but I want to show you, I want you to kind of see what the soil is already trying to do to heal itself. right? Like any living organism is trying to grow and mature, right? So what are the processes the soil's already put in to play to help itself mature? And so we mentioned the trees, we mentioned the birds, we mentioned these plants, and these little plants, even though they're, you know, what we would call weeds, and maybe they're not the prettiest thing, but they're what's growing there, right? Without any input from us, they are what's growing there, and they're putting their roots down. Again, they're exuding sugars, they're opening up some of that compaction, right? They're shading the soil, they might be attracting some animals to come eat their leaves and then drop their manure, right? So there's all this that's already happening. But what is the, and Nicole, since you just answered, I'm going to ask you, what would be the typical thing that someone would do with this soil, with this situation?
I think a lot of homeowners would till it.
I think they clear the weeds.
They clear the weeds, right? And you could, so they might till it to clear the weeds. They might, what else could they do to kill the weeds?
Weed killer.
Put weed killer on it, right? Put some Roundup on it. And now what have we done? All the effort the soil has taken to germinate all these seeds, you know, get all these roots in there, feeding itself. Now we've taken all that energy out, and we just we either pull all the greenery out and throw it in the green bin, or we spray it, and then when we spray it, whatever microbial life has built up, we kill that. And so now we're continuously kind of preventing the soil from healing itself, right? This is kind of that oppression, abuse cycle. So, you know, the first step to building soil health, I'd like to say, is to get your foot off of her neck. Okay, we're going to stop with the abuse. Get your foot off of her neck and let her breathe. Let her do what she knows how to do. We're trying to support the processes that are already in play.
Oh, I'm sorry, I have to ask. The tilling, you know, that's what I would have done 5 years ago, is I would have, you know, tried to till into that, you know, that soil, some other nutrients, you know, cow or chicken or, you know, poop, and, you know, till it in. But it seems that tilling is not really a good idea, I'm hearing, and I'm really not understanding why. That tilling in itself, and I'm not talking about any fertilizers or chemicals, but just the act of turning the earth and, you know, adding supplements to it, amendments. What's bad about that?
This is a very good question, and something we're going to go a little bit next week, but I'm going to give you a basic answer right now. You know, what we talked about, and again, I'll come back to here. What we talked about today was about soil building up structure, right? And when you go in with a tiller, if you had this soil and you tilled it, what you would be doing is chopping up all of its structure. Okay? The reason that most people till their soil is because their soil is compact, their soil is not able to accept water, their soil is lacking in nutrients, their soil is lacking in microbes. So when you till, if you start with that and you till, now all of a sudden your soil has some looseness to it. It's able to accept water. It's able to accept nutrients, but it doesn't have the structure to hold any of that. So within a season, again, because the aeration, the porousness is just created mechanically, within a season, we come back to collapse, to compaction. And then again, we open it up, and then again, we compact it, and then again, we open it up, and again, compact it. Because we are trying to hold up the soil ourselves without relying on the support of the billions and billions of organisms whose life work it is to create soil structure, right? Like, we're trying to do it ourselves. So, you know, short answer, once your soil is healthy, tillage is just going to harm it. When your soil is unhealthy, immature, then we can initially use tillage to kind of mix in compost or mix in nutrients, but then we want to pretty much not till after that. Does that answer your question? And we're going to talk more about that next week.
Yes, thank you. Great answer.
So are we saying that we do not want, for compacted soil, are we saying that we do not want to till? That the ideal method for regeneration of the soil is to place, well, one of the methods is to place compost on top of it and then go from there?
Yeah, we're going to get, that's what all of next week is about. So I'll leave half of that answer for next week. And I'll just say, in general, we are going to be avoiding soil tillage. Okay, in general, soil tillage is harmful to soil health. All right, is that okay?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, so we're running to the end of class here, so I might come back to this next week, ecological succession. So just a primer. We're trying to feed soil, right? That's one of our jobs as caretakers of the soil. So there's certain foods, again, your soil is immature. Soil is almost like a baby, doesn't have the ability to feed herself very well. What are some of the things that are, just like a baby, like you feed babies baby food, right? You don't feed a baby a hamburger, you feed a baby food, and baby food is food that has been kind of broken down, pre-digested, maybe inoculated with microbes already. So if you think about a mother feeding her child, she might chew up the food, inoculate the food with the microbes in her mouth, put the enzymes from her mouth into the food, chew it up, and then feed it to the baby, right? And so this is giving the, passing on or reducing the burden on the baby and making the food easier to digest. So when we have a immature soil, we want to start with foods that are easiest to digest, and wait till on the harder stuff until the soil is more mature. Okay, so this diagram is just for you. Compost is essentially soil baby food. It is broken down, chopped up, has the microbes in it, like has all the microbes needed to break itself down, and it's easy for the soil to feed on. Poop is very similar. Poop is already, bananas and carrots and zucchini and seeds from birds and animals. They're pre-broken down the food. They poop it right on the soil. Very easy to digest. Pee, urine, leaves, wood shavings, fine materials that are easy for the soil to eat. Then we move up to a little bit harder. I've included some things here that take thousands of years for the soil to digest, but rest assured they will be digested. I see a question from Swadna.
Yes. So are we in this series, are we going to be talking about composting too?
We are. Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Today, I really just wanted to give you a really solid foundation of understanding soil health, what the difference between mature and immature soil is. And next week, we're really going to focus on some of the practices. And then the second Saturday session, or the second outdoor session, is we're going to actually do some of those practices. Okay, so I think we're going to have to wrap it up here. I'm already a little over. So this weekend, so for those of you who are in LA and are going to be joining us for the in-person Saturday, we're going to be going to 2 of my gardens. For the recorded class, it's the same. We're going to the same 2 gardens in the recording. And I just wanted to show you some before pictures. So before we actually go out, I want you to kind of see what it looked like before I started any of this. The first one is my parents' garden. We call it the growing home. And here's a picture of me. This is in like 2009. It's kind of a typical suburban home, Los Angeles. We had a nice green lawn. We had my mom has always been a gardener, so there were some fruit trees and some flowering plants around. Here's a front yard. This is actually when we first started to remove the lawn, and we'll talk about that. And then the second garden we're going to is at a church in the city of Claremont. And again, just to show you what it started with. And then on Saturday, or when we release the video, and those of you that join us in person, you'll see what the transformation is. Okay, so homework. If you haven't done so, please complete the pre-course survey. The link for that was on week 1's homework. Read the course curriculum today. And I wrote a story, or kind of like almost like a poem or something. I haven't figured out what to call it. So you can read that one. And then you have 2 outdoor homework assignments. The full instructions are on Teachable. Basically what I want you to do is I want you to go out into your garden, or if you don't have a garden, find a place to go to. Could be a neighbor's, could just be a park. And I want you to kind of play with the soil. So I want you to dig into it. I want you to see how hard it is, how soft it is, what the texture is like. I want you to smell it. I want you to do the jar test if you haven't done the jar test, and see what that texture is like. I want you to dig a hole, pour some water in it, and see how long it takes for that water to infiltrate. I want you to look around and see if the soil is a little bit different in different parts of the garden. How is the soil under that tree? How is the soil under that rock? How is the soil over, in this exposed area? How is the soil in this shady area? So that is, I think that's both parts. I just set it together. So just go on Teachable and check out that homework. And I'd like you to share your experiences and anything that you found interesting on Teachable under week 2. Okay. Any final questions? Jacqueline, go ahead. Oh no, Nicole, you had a question?
I do. My question is about how to access the recording of your Saturday tour if we aren't local to Southern California and if we aren't available at all on Saturday.
So since the Saturday session is outdoors, like there's no way for us to bring a camera with us. So what the online folks are getting is a pre-recorded Saturday session where I'm speaking more directly to you on the camera. We did it a different way previously, but now we've made really nice. I think all these the videos are going to end up being like an hour and a half. So they will be posted on Saturday, and you can watch. They'll be posted to the same place that the recordings from these Wednesdays are posted. So you just watch it on your own time. Okay.
Thank you.
Everyone got
Where are those recordings from Wednesdays? Sorry. Where are
What's
the
that?
recordings from Wednesdays? Is it in the section that says class links?
I believe so, and if it's not, we'll get it put there. I think it was sent to you in your week 1 email. The week 1 email was sent the day after class last week, and there's basically one page, the Regenerative Gardening Student Hub on the Kiss the Ground website. You enter a password, and all the videos for the entire class are going to be just there for you on that one page. So you only ever need to log to that one spot.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm tired of talking. So thank you all for joining today. I hope you enjoyed today's class. I have to go clean up now. And okay, yeah. So enjoy your evening. See you on. So for those of you who are coming outdoors on Saturday, I'm going to send an email with all the instructions. So just look out for that. All right. Good night.
Thank you.